Remember when we were little, all the stories started with, "Once upon a time?" My story started that way too. One bright sunny November afternoon, I was standing in my driveway washing my 2008 Bullitt Mustang. There are guys who like to relax by playing golf, and there are those who like to just take a nap. But I was washing my car, relaxing, and letting my mind find the answers to my problems. I was living on borrowed time, and I knew it. Oddly enough, what I thought I knew and what was going to happen were two different things. According to the weatherman's forecast, the warm weather that has settled in late fall could last another week or two. That would give me at least 7 to 14 extra days of riding the Bullet. After that, I'll have to put it away for the winter and switch to my Jeep. I had all my favorite Turtle Wax ice products laid out in the cart and was about to finish the interior and then start on the exterior when, all of a sudden, an impaired vehicle drove down my street and stopped in front of the house. I recognized the driver, or at least the person behind the wheel. It was my wife's mother, Judy. She got out of the car, leaving it at an angle in the middle of the street, and ran down my driveway. As she approached, I noticed tears in her eyes, and she rushed toward me. She buried her head in my chest and started crying hard. "Come on, Judy," I said softly. "Let's go into the house and you can tell us everything." I led her into the house and sat her down at the kitchen table. "He's such an asshole," she cried. "Judy, would you like something to drink?" I asked. "Do you have any tea?" she asked between sobs. I nodded, brought her a cup and made her tea. "Judy, give me your keys so I can get your car off the street before someone hits it," I said. She handed me her keys and I carried her into the living room where she would be more comfortable. I yelled upstairs and called for my wife Penny to come down. I slipped out the back door and moved Judy's Accord into the driveway behind my Mustang, but not too close to it. I didn't want the car to get mad at me. When I got back to the kitchen, the tea was ready, and I carried it in the tray of sugar, milk, and a large piece of chocolate cake that Judy herself had brought the day before into the living room. I placed the tray in front of Judy. "Thank you, Donnie," Judy sobbed. "Pen, you're so lucky to have him. You may never have to worry about your husband cheating on you again," she said. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that Ed, Pen's father, could be cheating on Judy. I started to walk away, but Judy grabbed my arm. "Donnie, you're part of our family too," she said, "and I want to talk to you." "Okay, Judy," I said. "Why?" she asked. "Why is he doing this?" "What does he do?" I asked. "What is it about you men that makes you cheat?" she asked. I started to feel uncomfortable. "Mom, when I was in college, we learned that males are genetically predisposed to spread their seed to as many willing fertile females as possible. Maybe Dad has that predisposition in abundance. Or maybe it's not his fault. Men are just born that way. And maybe some women are too. Society even laughs and looks the other way when men behave this way. They say he's manly or a ladies' man. And when a woman behaves like that, she's a slut," Penny says. "I'm not talking about men in general," Judy said. "I'm talking about your father, who swore to be faithful to me and love me, and he continues to—" "Mom, you know Dad loves you," Penny interrupted. "He loves you more than anything in the world. But he just needs to spread his seed. You can't fight nature. All you can do is try to work with her. When he married me, he swore that my needs and our marriage would be above nature for him," Judy said. The sound of the doorbell put an end to the conversation, at least for the time being. "I'll do it on my own," I said, glad for the opportunity to take my mind off the painful and emotionally charged situation. Not that I didn't care. I liked both of Penny's parents, but all I wanted to do was wash the car. Opening the door, I came face to face with Penny's father, Ed. He looked like a dog that had been kicked. Ed was stocky and squat, with a balding back of his head and seemingly the only eyebrow that managed to hang over his forehead. Why a guy who looked like him would even be around Judy, let alone marry her, was a topic best left in the hands of science fiction authors because it made no sense. But for the same guy to cheat on her, that made even less sense. "Hi, Dawn," he said softly. "I saw Judy's car in the driveway. Is she here?" "They're in the living room," I said. I pointed his way and he walked in slowly. I stepped through the door he'd just entered through and shook my head. I grabbed the hose and started to hose the car down to remove the sticking dirt and debris from the coating before I soaped it up and washed it. I was just getting down to business and was telling the car how nice it would feel when it was clean and rubbed to a shine again when a giggle sounded from behind me. Just as I turned my head to see who it was, two thin arms wrapped around my waist. A strand of brown hair fell over my shoulder. "Donnie, do you love me?" she asked. "Of course I do, Penny. You already know that," I replied. "I'm having a family crisis here, honey," she said. "I need some help. I need you to grill some steaks and help me talk my mom into it. Maybe they'll actually go for the divorce this time." "Has he done this before?" I asked. "Several times," Penny replied. "They love each other so much, but they keep doing it. I can tell that Dad is really serious about stopping this time. He even suggested they get help. All the rest of the time, he said he didn't need a psychiatrist playing with his head. But now he's finally realized he probably can't quit on his own. And Mom knows he loves her." "Maybe she should do something more than that," I said. "What do you mean?" Penny asked. "Look, honey, they're both adults. They're older than us. They know they have to be responsible for their actions and the results of the choices they've made. So maybe if your mom refused to put up with this a long time ago, she wouldn't be going through this now. And maybe if she had, your father would have realized that if he kept doing it, it would eventually cost him his life." "I don't understand you, dear," Penny said. "Okay, I'll put it simply," I said. "If I were your mom, the first time I caught him cheating, I would have divorced him. I heard you tried to tell her about his character and all that, but I think that's bullshit. It was like you were justifying his actions. And he needs to realize that every time he goes out and does that, there's a chance he could lose his wife and family." Penny looked at me like she was shocked. Then she tightened her lips and they trembled. I realized she was moving into a fight, flight, or tears reaction. I watched her say nothing and then her tears started flowing. I hugged her and told her to calm down. I would do whatever she wanted. "Donnie, this is easy for you. Your parents aren't the ones talking about the breakup. Your parents were perfect, so you never went through this. I don't want my parents to break up, and I don't want them to live the rest of their lives alone. When we have kids, I want them to have two grandparents who love them, and I want us all to be one big happy family. I don't want to worry about not being able to invite one of my parents to a birthday party or barbecue because the other won't come if they're there," she lamented. "Okay, honey," I said. "I'll help. I'll cook the steaks, and you can send your dad to talk to me while you talk to your mom. Maybe when the food is ready, you two can join us on the deck and we can get them talking." I philosophically disagreed with what I was doing, but I loved Penny like flowers love rain. I could also understand her need to try to keep her parents together. Most of us don't want our family to break up. We expect our parents to be paragons of virtue. After all, they are the ones from whom we drew our examples of right and wrong. Even when they fail, we tend to look past it, just to stay out of the way. So I spent an unpleasant afternoon chatting with my father-in-law. From talking about my Mustang, during which Penny's father lied to me, we moved on to discussing other sports. Penny's dad told me that he has a friend who has an 80s Mustang Bullet. He told me how much faster it was than the ones they make now, and that he had borrowed it a couple times. I just nodded and smiled. But I thought he was a lying sack of shit because Bullets weren't made in the 80s and 90s. And as for speed, the 2012 V6 Mustang has more horsepower than the V8S of the 80s and 90s, and a higher top speed. They also handle better and have better fuel economy. Anyway, after that we talked about sports and how to cook the best steak on the grill. He was giving me all this fatherly advice and trying to make himself look like an expert on how to be a man, while I had to wash the car. So not long after I won his favor, I let the other shoe drop. "So what's going on between you and Judy?" I asked. He looked like I'd punched him in the face. Then he broke down and almost cried. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he cried. "She wasn't supposed to find out." Original, I thought. Are there any cheaters in the world whose spouses were supposed to find out? And if he didn't want to hurt her, why the hell did he do what would hurt her the most? I had to work hard not to snap at him. I remained surprisingly calm and collected, even though everything was boiling inside of me. Judy was so much like her daughter that I imagined him doing something to hurt Penny too. And I wouldn't let anyone hurt my wife. More than that, I wanted to kick that cheating bastard off my property. In my opinion, Judy needed to divorce his ass. He was a serial cheater and would do it again. Judy would be better off without him. I thought about my dad and Uncle Steve. They were both great guys. My mom died a few years ago in a car accident. And my Aunt Millie, Uncle Steve's wife, decided in the last years of her life that she was a lesbian. Dad passed away a year or so after Mom, so he was no longer with us, but any of those guys would have given anything to have a woman like Judy in his life. And they'd be better for her than that sack of shit. but I smiled at him, thinking about it. An hour or so later, Judy and Penny joined us on the deck. We ate, and the meal was enjoyable. Ed had perfected the puppy game. He carried more nonsense than a herd of cattle. I think part of my problem is that in the last few years of my life, I've drifted away from the church, he said. I need a dose of a good book to get me back on track. I looked across the table at him, expecting to see him struck by lightning. When it didn't happen, I exclaimed, "Excuse me." Then I ran into the house and went down to the basement. I closed all the doors behind me and buried my face in one of the couch cushions. Then I laughed at the full power of my lungs. There was no way that bastard would have the guts to even walk into a church. He was just trying to say what he thought would once again save him. When I finished laughing, tears were still running down my cheeks and my face was red. I went back and sat down at the table. Penny was looking at me strangely. The expression on Ed's face was clear as snow. It was as if he was waiting to be counted among the saints. Judy looked at me and I felt insignificant. The expression on her face spoke for itself. She was really in a lot of heartache. She was on the verge of cutting this jerk out of her life forever and was counting on me and her daughter to help her make the right decision. "So, Donnie, do you think counseling could be a solution?" she asked. I looked at Ed, who nodded weakly, and I looked at Penny, who was standing next to him trying to save her parents' marriage. She too nodded almost imperceptibly. Then I looked into Judy's eyes. Only there wasn't a trace of deception in her eyes. And I had done it. I did it for purely selfish reasons. Counseling should help you sort out the problems in your marriage, I said. If you get a good therapist, they will sometimes help you see things in yourself and in your relationship that would otherwise go unnoticed. They can help you see patterns of behavior that aren't visible to the average person. That wasn't actually a lie. I'd heard it on a program about therapy on the Science Channel, so maybe it was at least partially true in some situation. Judy looked me in the eye and believed me. She nodded her head and said, "Okay, we'll give it a try." She reached across the table and took Ed's hand and smiled at him. Penny looked at me. I felt like a battered pokewind. I'm a carnivore. Sometimes I eat only meat, no vegetables, to shove more steak or roast down my throat, but that day I almost threw up from the steak. I felt like shit about what I'd just done. "I hate to interrupt you, lovebirds," I said, "but I need to show Ed one more thing about my car." While the ladies cleared the table and put the dishes in the dishwasher, I took Ed into my garage. "Hey, your car isn't in the garage," he said, smiling. "It's in the driveway." I grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the garage wall with such force that the clock on the wall inside the garage fell and shattered on the concrete floor. "Bastard, this is the first and last time I'm going to lie to save your rotten cheating ass," I smirked. "If you cheat on her one more time, you'll have more than just a divorce to worry about. Do you understand?" He quickly shook his head. I slammed him against the wall one more time just for emphasis. Then we walked back into the house. "They didn't make them like this in the old days, did they, Ed?" I asked as we walked back into the kitchen. I was smiling this time. Ed tried to fake it, but he had a headache and was in shock. No one had ever talked to him like that before. "No, babe." Penny came out of the pantry and noticed something I hadn't. "Daddy, you have a lump on the back of your head," she said. "Where did you get it from? Are you okay?" "Ha ha ha," I laughed. While we were in the garage, this clock fell off the wall and landed on Ed's head. And his head is hard as a rock. He smashed the damn clock. He's a tough old bird. Ed nodded his head woodenly. We had a great time with Penny that night. Just a month and a half later, 3 days after Christmas, I was holding her hand and hugging Judy as we entered the morgue. As we entered the unexpectedly cool room, we found ourselves face to face with a man who looked as alive as the people he cared for. "I'm sorry for your loss," he smiled. If his smile was supposed to be friendly or comforting, he failed on both counts. His smile in this situation just looked creepy. He led us over to a raised table. I noticed that by then Judy and I were helping Penny as she took uncertain steps. When the priest pulled the sheet off the body, he did it with a skill that many magicians would be hard-pressed to surpass. I almost expected him to get down on one knee and shout, "Ta-da!" From the moment we stared at the lifeless body lying before us, our reactions changed. Penny sank to the floor and began to sob. Judy nodded her head and turned away. I went into shock, with hundreds of ridiculous thoughts running through my head per second. When I looked at the body formerly known as Ed, I was first struck by how clean it was. Then my brain kicked in and reminded me that they had probably cleaned the body for the autopsy they would be performing soon. I inquired about the cost of the autopsy. I counted at least 8 or 9 wounds. "Can you identify the deceased?" the priest asked. Judy and Penny nodded their heads mournfully. "Do you have a question?" the crypt caretaker asked. "No," I replied, realizing how stupid my thought had been. "Once again, I'm sorry for your loss. Have a good day," he said, and turned away. Judy and I took Penny's hands and led her toward the morgue exit. The detective who had led us there was in the waiting room. He put his hat on his head and walked over to us. "So the deceased was your husband?" he asked Judy. She nodded her head and squeezed my hand tightly. "When he didn't come home from work last night, I got worried. Ed does a lot of things, but he always calls to let me know what's going on," she said. He sat us down at the table and asked if we wanted coffee or something to drink. I looked at the rancid coffee maker and said, "No, thank you." "What happened to it?" Penny asked. "I can't divulge specific details of an ongoing investigation," he began. "But hell, it'll still be in the papers by the time you get home. Your husband, your father, young lady, was found at the Sly Easy Motel on Sycamore Avenue. There was also a hysterical woman on the scene. It took us almost all night for her to calm down enough to talk about what happened and say anything coherent. Apparently, she and your father were sleeping together in this motel and were discovered by her husband. He kicked in the door and found the two of them together. He kept the last bullet for himself." "You better go back to the morgue and say goodbye," Judy said softly. "Ma'am, I'll ask the coroner not to touch his face," the detective said. "That won't be necessary," Judy said. "Oh, it's not a problem," said the detective. "We do it all the time, and in this case there's nothing to investigate. We have videotape that shows the guy kicking in the door. Your husband had already left, and there's no way the woman could have moved around the room without leaving footprints." "Detective," Judy said icily, "I meant there's no need for that. I don't care where he's buried." Judy stood up and I rose with her. Penny looked at her mother. "She's upset," Penny told the detective, who only nodded his head. As soon as we pulled away from the detective's office, Judy's resolve weakened and she began to cry, resting her head on my shoulder. I drove them both home and tried to make them comfortable. Throughout that day, people who learned of Ed's death stopped by to offer their condolences. My neighbor Tanya stopped by with a tray of delicacies. "How are you holding up?" she asked. I shrugged. "I'm fine, honey, we're friends," she said. "I know you've been spending a lot of time with the old man. I used to see him a lot when he came to visit. He used to talk to you while you were pleasuring the queen next door." Tanya, of course, was referring to my Mustang. She always told me that if her husband Rick spent as much time on her as I did on my car, she'd be a lucky girl. "Actually, Tanya," I started. Then I lowered my voice so no one could hear us. "I couldn't stand that old bastard. He was a serial cheater. It was just in his nature to cheat." "You can't go against nature," she laughed. "And Judy is so sweet," I continued. "I don't know how she put up with him for so long. After she gets over his death, she'll be better off without him." "You're vain," she laughed. "Women aren't like that, especially her generation. He was her first lover, her first husband, her first everything. Why do you think she kept forgiving him? She loved him, silly girl. She couldn't imagine herself with anyone else. They're like magnets. They're so drawn to each other. Without him, she'd be lost." Tanya was wrong about several things. As the weeks went by, Judy's anger at Ed did not subside. At first, she even refused to attend his funeral. I convinced her to go for Penny's sake. Eventually, Penny got angry at her mother and at me. I told her I didn't want to speak at her father's funeral. She probably thought I was just nervous about public speaking, but truth be told, I couldn't think of a single good thing to say about the guy. One of his best friends ended up speaking. His words were memorable. "We're all here to say goodbye to Ed Bauer. Well, Eddie was, he was Ed. You should have known him." Yeah, even his best friend, who had known him for 45 of his 50 years of life, couldn't think of a single good word to say about him. After the funeral, Judy fought for her life. She became more and more a part of us. Some things she just couldn't deal with. If we were watching a TV show and a guy cheated on his wife, Judy would go ballistic. Penny and I spent a lot of time talking about what we could do for her. Penny seemed to get over his father's death easily. We just moved on. After all, it wasn't like we saw him every day. It was about 3 months after his death, and we gathered with friends and family. We thought we were doing the sensible thing. We invited just about every eligible man in Judy's age group we could think of. In her 43 years, Judy wasn't old and looked like she could have been Penny's sister, not her mother. It wasn't the guys that were the problem. They were all around her. The problem was Judy. She was sweet, kind, but one of a kind. She didn't know how to flirt or work out at the gym. Hell, when she turned 18 and her parents gave her permission to start dating, Ed, who was 25 and had already been married twice, knocked her down, took her cherry, got her pregnant, and married her. Ed was the only guy she'd ever dated. Judy just didn't know the rules of the game, or the game itself for that matter. That first time, we didn't count on anything. We decided that in order to succeed, we'd have to make these little get-togethers a regular occurrence. The trouble started after the party. As we were cleaning up, I noticed Penny's cell phone on the counter. When I approached the counter, it beeped. This meant that she had received a text message. I figured it was a message from her mom thanking us for inviting her to the party. I turned on my phone and went into shock as I read the message. I scrolled back through her messages and even located the location. Penny was texting some guy and was dating him. I went into shock. For a long time, I just stood there staring at her phone. I felt like my world was ending. I had no idea that any of this was happening or even possible. Penny and I spent a lot of time together. When did she ever have time to have fun with anyone else? Actually, that's why I was helping with the cleaning. Our minds are a very confusing place. Because as I stood there holding the little piece of plastic, glass, and electronics I bought for her, I felt sick. I also felt really stupid because she had given me all the clues. When her father was caught, Penny always took his side. Most women wouldn't be so quick to defend a cheater, even if it was their own father. Penny, on the other hand, vigorously defended him. I hadn't even considered the fact that perhaps she had her reasons. When she defended him, she always adamantly swore that her father loved her mother. It was simply his nature to deceive. Perhaps it was a case of like father and like daughter. After all, you can't go against nature. I guess I was expected to react the way Judy did and just accept it. Judy really did like jerks. She had her own nature, too. She was loving and forgiving. Maybe that's why she forgave him over and over again, all the way to the end. Maybe that was what her anger at him was all about. Maybe she was angry not that he'd been caught cheating again, but that his death had robbed her of the opportunity to forgive him again. Someone's not cleaning up very well, Penny smiled. But that's okay. I've done enough for both of us. Why don't we move into the boudoir? Honey, I really need to adjust the brakes, I said. I watched her reaction as I said this. Her face reflected sadness, frustration, and anger. How long will it take? She asked. If I do everything, it will take almost all night, I said. Can we do it another time? Maybe tomorrow night? She looked at me strangely. And then different thoughts visited me. Maybe I have something else planned for tomorrow, she smiled. After all, it's not like we do something almost every night. Maybe tomorrow will be my turn. The thought of what she'd just said made me mad. So she thought there was a possibility that I had jumped her after she was with another guy. I wondered how long it had been going on. All I knew was that it was over at this point. Honey, I'd be happy if you didn't procrastinate and just came to bed with me, she said. Honey, I'd be glad if you'd let me take it slow because I just spent all day grilling and entertaining people at a party for your mom. For you? I replied. Nah, if you really loved me, you would have done the breaks later, she said. If you really loved me, you would have let me do the breaks, I added. What's wrong with you, Donnie? She asked. Usually you love me from the moment we wake up until the last second we open our eyes. And today, you don't want that. Do you know how many women here have told me how lucky I am to have you? Even Tanya told me what she would do to you if I wasn't here. So I really want to do this right now. It can be done tomorrow too, I said. And with those words, I left her standing where she was. Okay, she called to me through the door. And knowing Penny as well as I did, I realized what this was all about. The reason she was so desperate to have sex with me tonight was because we weren't going to have sex tomorrow. She was going to pretend to be tired or something, but really, she was sure she didn't want to have sex with me after having fun with the man she met at the motel. I may have jumped to conclusions. I didn't know how to feel about it until it happened. Perhaps something else was going on. I was reminded of a TV show where a woman repeatedly dated a guy, and her husband, who was insanely jealous, found out. The husband was a cement truck driver, and he was so concerned about what his wife was doing that he drove home in the middle of the workday to check on her. He saw a new Mustang convertible in the driveway and saw a guy pull into his house. He pulled in behind a cement truck and dumped the entire load of cement on the convertible, wrecking the car. Turns out his wife wasn't cheating on him. She took out a loan on the Mustang as a gift, and he wrecked it. She ended up divorcing him. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I woke up and Penny made me breakfast. "I'm sorry," I said. "I love you, Pen." "What's gotten into you this morning?" she asked, smiling. "I just wanted you to know how much I care about you," I said. I felt like shit. I felt like this was my last chance to convince her not to do something we'd both regret. At the same time, if nothing had happened and I had gotten it all wrong, I wouldn't feel so guilty. I drove to work, and once there, I plunged into my morning routine. By 9:30, I was ahead of schedule and had almost nothing left to do. I worked a couple more hours and left at 11:30. Just as I was leaving the building, I got a call from Penny. "Hi, honey," she said. "Would you like to have lunch with your wife?" "I'd love to," I replied, smiling. "Do you want us to meet at home or at a restaurant?" I breathed a heavy sigh of relief. I was so glad I had come to the wrong conclusion. "Hold on, honey. I have another call," she said. A few seconds later, she came back. "Donnie, can we have lunch tomorrow? Mommy needs to talk," she said. "I'll probably be busy," I said and hung up. I called Judy on the phone. "Hi," I said. "How was your day?" "Even better after talking to my favorite son-in-law," she said, smiling. "I'm your only son-in-law," I coined. "But you're still my favorite," she said. "Have you talked to Penny yet today, Judy?" I asked. "She's going to ask you something." "I hope you're not going to set me up with one of your lonely old friends again," she said. "To tell you the truth, I'm not sure I'm ready to date anyone yet." "No, I just wanted to take you out to dinner for a threesome," I said. "Oh, okay," she said, smiling. "I'm going to enjoy it. When she calls, I'm going to pretend to be surprised." "Bye, Judy," I said. "Have a good day." The call delayed me another 10 minutes, and now I knew Penny had called to ask me to lunch just to make sure I was at work. Maybe she'd learned some tricks from her father, but then the old bastard got caught a lot. I got in my car and drove to the motel. There were a few familiar cars in the parking lot, but that didn't matter. I spotted Penny's Ford Focus as soon as I pulled up to the hotel. I knew exactly which room to go to. I spotted the cleaning lady and paid her $50 to open the room door as quietly as possible. She backed off and I opened the door. I had no doubt who it was. As soon as I opened the door, he tried to turn around to see what was going on. I instantly crossed the room and herded him off the bed. I pinned him to the hard, cheap floorboards. "Donnie, what are you doing?" Penny screamed, trying to tear me away from him. I very calmly stood up and pulled her hands away from me. "Don't you ever touch me again," I said calmly. I called my secretary and told her I wasn't feeling well and would be out for the rest of the day and probably the next day too. My second call was to 911 to report that there had been a beating. Penny was just sitting on the bed. A couple times she tried to say something to me, but I just told her to shut up. "Donnie, when we get home," she finally started. "We don't have a home," I said. "I'm not living with a whore. Go to your mother, Penny." The police arrived and I left the room and spoke to them. "I'm the one who called," I said. "You don't look that bad," one of the police officers said. "Not me, him," I said, pointing to Rick, who was still unconscious. They handcuffed me and put me in the car just as the ambulance arrived. In the police cruiser, I hardly said anything. The officers tried to get me to talk about what had happened. Although I would have easily confessed what I had done, I was too depressed to talk about it. As soon as I arrived at the station, I was photographed, fingerprinted, and detained on suspicion of assault. Until the details of the case came out, they only had suspicions. Even if I had agreed to admit that I had done it, they had no proof. In every major city in the world, there are countless lunatics willing to confess to any crime, from the Lindbergh kidnapping to the Ripper murders in London. There are also leagues of homeless people who are willing to confess to a crime just to get a few meals and a bunk. This is especially true in bad weather, when some people are willing to sacrifice their freedom to have a roof over their heads. I was placed in a large cell with at least 8 other people. None of them approached me, and I was content to sit on an empty bench along the back wall. Most of the guys looked like they were either poor or drunk. I decided to use this time wisely. Since all I could do was think, it seemed like the perfect time to consider my next moves. There is a big difference between suspecting that your spouse is cheating on you and actually confronting it. There is also the issue of emotional attachment. Let's face it, people change over time. It is not uncommon for a couple to become so estranged that one of them does something drastic to get a divorce. In such cases, the subsequent divorce can be a fresh start for both of them. In such cases, the separation can be pleasant. But there are also times when, over the years, a couple is so broken and split that they just can't stand each other. They fight not because they love each other and want to stay together, but because they hate each other and want to make the other's life as miserable as possible. Like, I'm not going to let this asshole get a divorce so he can sleep with his goddamn secretary and be happy. That's not what happened in my case. I loved Penny with all my heart and soul. Until I walked into that motel room and saw her with Rick, I intended to spend the rest of my life with her. That's why I was in so much pain. I literally felt like someone had ripped out a part of my soul. I didn't realize that. We had a beautiful life, and I really thought we loved each other. At least I loved her. And the guy she'd chosen, Rick, was older than me, and I was 6 years older than Penny. Rick was old, and he was fat and bald. I just didn't understand that. If she wanted an old fat guy, why the hell did she marry me? In fact, she was the one who pursued me when we first started dating. We met at a bar. We were both there with friends. We didn't know each other, and none of our friends knew each other. She saw me, and for the rest of the night, every time I turned around, she was by my side. She even tried to say some dirty phrase to me. I remember looking into those beautiful eyes and just being mesmerized. And she said, "Well, if you're going to follow me around all night, maybe you could tell me your name." So I show up at a cheap motel and I see her with a fat elderly neighbor. I wonder how Tanya will feel about that. Just as I was starting to figure out what to do, I heard someone calling my name. "Don Osmond," a stout policeman called out to me. I walked over to him and peered through the bars as he started to open the door. Behind him and on either side of him stood 2 other policemen with their hands on the handles. "Are you guys going to shoot me?" I asked. "No, asshole, you're out on bail," he replied. "Who?" I asked. He just looked at me like I wasn't there. "Does it matter?" he asked. "What am I being charged with?" I asked. "And who bailed me out? How long have I been here?" "Look, buddy, you got too many damn questions," he said. "Do you want to get out or not?" "Officer," I said, "I know you deal with a lot of people in a lot of different situations and it affects everyone. You've heard it all too many times to repeat. But this is a new experience for me. This is the first time I've been in jail for whatever reason, so if you could take a minute and answer a couple questions for me. It won't take up much of your time, but it will make a big difference in my life." The other 2 police officers turned and looked at him. "Okay, shoot," he said. "It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you've been here for almost 2 hours." I spoke in low tones so that only he and the other police officers, who kept their eyes on the rest of my cellmates, could hear me. "I caught my wife and roommate together in a motel room this afternoon. I admit I handled it badly. I just don't want to see either of them ever again in my life. So if Penny is going to try to bail me out of my own money because she doesn't have a job, I'd rather stay here. I don't want anything more to do with her." "Sorry, kid," he said. "It's her. She's been crying the whole time, but you don't have to worry. Some fat guy and his lawyer are here to talk to the prosecutor. I don't think he's going to press charges against you, but he doesn't look good, so I wouldn't trust him. Anyway, they'll only keep you here for a couple days to cool off, and then they'll let you use the ATM and bail yourself out since there's no record on you and no one died." They left, looking at me with something akin to pity in their eyes. I sat down on the bench again and noticed that many of my cellmates were watching me. They were probably wondering what the hell I was talking to the cops about and why I wasn't leaving. I knew Penny was trying to bail me out because she felt guilty. I was honest with the cops. I wanted nothing more to do with her. At that moment, I felt guilty because I had helped convince Judy to give Ed another chance, even though I didn't want to do it for Penny. I wondered if I felt the same way Judy did when Ed cheated on her. Ed had done it over and over again, so Judy had experienced it more than once. I couldn't understand how she got through it. She had to be so much stronger than me. It's very strange. If you think about a person for a long time, they show up. Just as I was contemplating whether Penny would tell Judy about what she'd done, my cops came back. Hey, Osmond, another hottie came to see you. It's not the first one, it must be her sister. This one says her name is Judy. She's in the interrogation room. Would you like to meet her? Yes, I said. He made me put both my hands through the bars of the bars and then handcuffed me again. Then he opened the door while the others held their weapons at the ready and led me out, closing the door behind him. We walked down the hallway and entered a partitioned room. There was a huge panel of bulletproof glass with small holes in some places for people to talk through. I sat down and looked through the glass at Judy. For a minute, neither of us said anything. Hey, Donnie, she said. What's going on? So Penny didn't tell you? I asked. She just said you beat up your neighbor and went to jail, and you wouldn't let her bail you out because you were upset about it, she said. But I know you, Donnie, and I have a bad feeling about this. Judy, she cheated on me, I said, her face lowered. Not with... Isn't he disgusting? She asked in shock. But why? From what she told me, you're constantly... Before we could finish, a tall man in a cheap suit and glasses knocked on the wall. Excuse me, he said. Are you Don Osmond? I nodded my head. Can you join me in the conference room across the hall when you're done here? He pointed to my handcuffs, and the policeman removed them. He's not life-threatening. He has no criminal record. Why is he in handcuffs? He's here for assault, the policeman said. Although I would have done the same thing. He's actually here for fornication, not assault. Donnie, what are you going to do? Judy asked. I know how you feel, so don't do anything stupid. I'll call you tomorrow, I said. If I get out of here today, I'll send your daughter to stay with you. I walked into the conference room and saw 3 men sitting at a table with Penny. 2 of them I didn't recognize. When I walked in, Penny jumped to her feet and Rick stood up, limping toward me. Get off me, I shouted. I looked at the guy sitting at the table. If any of these assholes come near me, I'm going back to my cell. Penny and Rick walked back to where they were sitting and the guy behind the desk looked at them. Mr. Osmond, my name is Willis Drummond. I'm the district attorney for this county. Literally, thousands of cases come across my desk every day. Mr. Daniels is the attorney who is representing your neighbor. Anyway, Mr. Daniels has a proposal that would allow everyone here to leave immediately, seemingly without prejudice. What are you talking about, Willis? I asked. Why don't you tell him that, Charlie? He turned to Daniels. The lawyer looked at me and spoke as if he and I were old friends. Don, what happened here is an unfortunate situation. The emotional damage alone is terrible. There is no reason for you to leave this room with a criminal record that will cause you problems for the rest of your life. These are very serious charges. We're talking assault and battery, plus intent to cause grievous bodily harm, he said. Don't worry about that, I said. With my education and specialty, my employer and future employers won't care. He sighed. You don't need an innocent person getting hurt because of fun that got out of hand, he said. There's no reason for that. Who in this damn room is innocent? I asked. Just me? I'm the one who got hurt. At this point, Penny began to cry. I thought I had a woman I could love and be with for the rest of my life, and it turns out I don't. I thought I had a neighbor, or rather, a friend who lived next door to me, someone I could trust. But it turns out that's not true either. Donnie, what about Tanya? Rick asked. Tanya has never done anything bad to you. Why should she have to suffer through all of this? Say it. Tanya deserves to know what kind of scumbag she's married to. She doesn't deserve to be cheated on and lied to. No one deserves that, I said. Tanya is beautiful. She will come back. She'll eventually meet someone who will be much better for her than you are. She'll be fine. Maybe we'll get through this together. She doesn't need some fat chump. No, he shouted, please don't tell her. Daniel started trying to speak again. Here's the thing. My client agrees not to press charges against you. And you're forgetting that all of this happened. I agree to the charges, I said. I also agree to a jury trial. When 12 of our peers find out why I beat the shit out of your client, they'll make him and you tie each other up and tar and feather each other. I will also include his name in my divorce case and sue him for everything I can. I'll testify about what I saw and in Tanya's divorce case, I said. That's my plan. All 4 huddled together and talked in low tones. Rick and Penny seemed to be arguing. Finally, they looked at me again. "What do you want?" they asked. "Nothing," I replied. "I won't tell Tanya anything. You have my word on that. And I won't sue you or name you in the divorce. But you must testify in the divorce if necessary and deny all accusations. You also agree never to speak to me or come within 50 feet of me or my belongings without my permission." "Sold," he said with a wide grin on his face. "Hey, wait a minute. I know I'm within 50 feet of the GER right now, but the law doesn't start until I step away from the building, right?" "Rick, I don't care what you do to her. She's not mine anymore. Once my divorce is settled, I'll never see her again. She's all yours. Can I go now?" "No, Donnie," Penny shouted. "No, we're not doing this." "Willis, could you walk me to the counter so I can get my things? I need my wallet so I can get a cab home." As I walked down the hall, all I could hear was Penny crying. When I got home, Tanya was in the yard. She walked over to the fence and turned to me. "Where have you been, stranger?" she asked. "My husband got into the wrong neighborhood and got mugged. He got both eyes blacked out and his nose broken, poor guy." "That's tough, Tanya," I said. "I'm sorry to be so harsh, but I've had a rough day too. We'll talk later." "Hey, send your wife over here," she said. "Tanya, I don't have a wife anymore," I said, and walked out into the house, leaving her in shock. Just as I entered the house, the phone rang. I noticed it was Penny's cell phone, the same phone I'd used to find out what she was doing. I just let it ring until the voicemail answered the call. After the fifth ring, the phone went silent and abruptly turned on again. This time it was Judy's home number. I picked up the phone to tell Judy to call her daughter off. "Judy, can you—" I began. "Honey, you have to—" I hung up. About half an hour passed before the phone rang again. I looked at it. It was Judy's cell phone. I picked it up and said nothing. "Donnie, honey, are you there?" she asked. "Hi, Judy," I said. "No." I had to give Penny some hot tea with a couple of sleeping pills, she laughed. "She's not herself. She's crying and screaming and blaming everyone for ruining her life." "I don't doubt that," I said sadly. "But there aren't that many people to blame." "Oh, she blames it all on your neighbor, Rick. She says he also sold her that deal you agreed to. She also blames you for the way you're acting." "The way I'm acting?" I asked. "Donnie, you're not acting like me," she said softly. And that's exactly what she expected. "Will it ever get better?" I asked. "No," she answered even more gently than I did. "It gets worse over time. You start to doubt yourself. You wonder what's wrong with you that makes him want to be with another woman. You wonder what you're doing wrong. And you start comparing yourself to every new man you meet. You wonder if he will start sleeping with her now. And it gets worse as time goes on because no matter how much time passes, you will never be the same. You'll never regain the trust you lost. You've been testing him your whole life. Every time he's late or isn't where he's supposed to be, you think he's cheating on you." "Judy, can I tell you something?" I asked. "Of course, we're family," she said. "I lied to you," I said, "when we were trying to get you to get Ed back and go to counseling. At the time, I thought you should have given up on his cheating, but you told me what Penny wanted you to say because you love her so much," she finished. "I know, Donnie. You're a terrible liar. Your mouth says one thing and your eyes say something else entirely." "Ed was stupid," I said. "No one he could fool around with was worth a quarter of you." "Apparently it runs in their family," she said. "I can't believe she let that disgusting fat man even get near her, let alone—" "Judy, I'm sorry, but I'm not you," I said. "As much as it hurts me right now, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to take it all back when she's just going to wait a little while and then try to pull it all over again. What she said about her father, you can't argue with nature. Maybe she got it from him, but it's just something about her." "I hope that's not true," she said. "What about all those wild animals that are trained to perform in the circus and the ones people keep as pets? I guess you can fight nature in some cases." "But Judy, those are very rare cases, and they require a lot of work and a reward system. With circus animals, you have to start training when they are very young." I believe her, Judy. I think she's right. You and I are just stupid. You can't fight nature. Cheaters will cheat. "And what does that mean?" she asked quietly. "We have one of two options," I said. "If we free ourselves from it and start life anew, then we become who we are by nature. We're just good people who made a mistake and fell in love with the wrong people. In your case, you have a beautiful daughter to show for it. I, on the other hand, have nothing. So my life has been wasted at this point. On the other hand, if we keep putting up with it, hoping they will change, we become suckers. We're just willing to keep putting up with all the crap they dump on us. You've served your time in hell, Judy. Your next man should be worthy of you. And my next woman should be the same. Who are you talking to, Mom? Penny asked. Is it Donnie? Does he want to talk to me yet? Did you tell him how sorry I am? Did you tell him it wasn't my fault in any way? Bye, Judy, I said. I can see you have your hands full. Over the next few days, I talked to Judy a lot. Tanya and several women from next door would come to my house bringing me food and talking to me to cheer me up. I hired a lawyer and prepared an agreement. I prepared what I thought was a very fair agreement. I was making good money. I wanted to divide our property in half like a judge would have done. I knew it wasn't really fair to me, but I didn't want Penny to be left destitute. I simply had no intention of trying to save our relationship. I didn't want the situation to take an ugly turn. But if need be, I was willing to drag Rick to court or get him to sign a deposition. If things went to the worst-case scenario, I'd act like an idiot if I had to. I would just withdraw most of the money from my accounts and leave her whatever she could get from the sale of our share of the house. My attorney talked to Rick and got him to tell me everything about what happened between him and Penny. This had been going on for over 6 months. He was also sure he wasn't the first. I asked Judy if I could come over and talk to her and Penny. I drove up and Judy opened the door for me. I hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. Penny walked over to me. Honey, you have no idea how much I've missed you, she said. Penny, I came here to make your life as easy as possible, I said. I didn't want some stranger ambushing me to hand you the divorce papers, so I brought them myself. No, Donnie, she shouted. I'm going to stop. This will never happen again. You have to give me another chance. It was a mistake. I just couldn't help it. I'm going to see a counselor. Penny, that won't help, I said. It's not like it's the first time. My lawyer interviewed Rick. We all know about it. You and Rick have been dating for over 6 months, and I don't think Rick was the first. How the hell could you even look me in the eye? It was just sex, she said. You and I are so much more than that. You and I are so much less than that, I said. We used to be so much more. Now all that's left is a gold ring. And that ring means nothing when the vows we made are broken. Donnie, please, she began. No, Penny, I replied. I'm not going to live like this. You're just being unfair, she whined. You're breaking my heart. You have to forgive me. You love me, damn it. Penny, shut up, Judy said. Mom, stay out of it, Penny said. He's just being unreasonable. It doesn't work that way. He just doesn't want to forgive me. It doesn't have to be that way. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I love him so much. I feel like my heart is going to burst. Boo, 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 Judy yelled. You're just like your father, Penny, Judy said. You act like the whole world revolves around you and what you want. I've forgiven your father over and over again. And maybe you've started to think that's the way it should be. Donnie is not me. You're a grown woman, so act like it. You had the perfect marriage and you ruined it. Now deal with it. It's not easy for Donnie either. He's been so depressed the last few days. I can't believe you would do this to a man who loves you so much. Then I remembered that your father did that to me. I'm glad he's free. I only wish I was. But Mom, I'm depressed too, Penny said. I've admitted I was wrong and I'm sorry. I'm hurting too, you know. Penny, it's your own fault. As much as you are my daughter and I love you, maybe you deserve this. Sooner or later, you're going to have to answer for your actions. I agree, Penny said. But I don't think what I did was bad enough to get a divorce because of it. Shouldn't that be up to the person you hurt? Judy asked. Marriage is what two people want, Penny. Maybe Donnie doesn't want to be married to you anymore. Stop saying that, Mom, Penny shouted. She turned to me and looked across the room. Donnie, haven't I been a good wife to you so far? I've cleaned your house. I've cooked your meals. I've given you everything a wife could ask for. So why can't you focus on what I've done right instead of what I've done wrong? Honey, you look the way I feel, she continued. You look like someone suddenly pulled the rug out from under your feet and left you spinning in the air with nothing to focus on and nothing to hold on to. I feel the same way. I'm just lost without you. I can't stop crying. I feel like my life is over. Nothing makes sense. You have the power to make us both better. All you have to do is forgive me once. I swear to you that it will never happen again. I left the room without saying anything. As I reached the door, I turned around and looked at her. Penny, please get a lawyer, I said. I want to get this over with as soon as possible. I need a fresh start in life. I drove home, and as I stepped out onto the porch, I saw Tanya again. Hey, Donnie, wait up, she called out. I sighed and watched her cross the yard. Tanya was dressed in old denim shorts and a t-shirt that had seen better days when she worked in the yard. The t-shirt had the name of some obscure band printed on it and was almost wet with sweat. Tanya had obviously forgotten her bra, or just decided she didn't need one while she was working in the yard. I need to tell you a couple things, she said. Tanya wasn't as slender as Penny or Judy, but she was on a whole other level. I guess while I'd been happily married, I'd just downplayed my attraction to her. But now that I'd broken up with Penny, the floodgates had opened. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked. I'm sorry, I said. I shouldn't have. Donnie, I just wanted you to know that Rick and I are always there for you, she said. If you need anything or want to talk. Actually, I think it would be good for him, too. He's still reeling from being mugged. I think most of his confidence is gone. You know how you have that macho male ego? Well, his ego is shattered because some asshole beat him half to death and took all his money. Maybe talking to you will help him. You know how it works. When you have to help someone through their problems, it makes you feel strong. I think it might be good for Rick. I'll send it over in a little while. But I wanted to do something for you, too. That'll be fine, she smiled. But that's not what I meant. You know I'm a married woman. Besides, you're not that kind of guy. I shrugged and tried to smile. I just smiled at her and thought again about telling her what a piece of shit she was married to. But I realized that telling her that would only hurt her. Besides, Rick getting his ass kicked by me and thinking he might lose his marriage was probably doing everything he could to be the husband she deserved. Why should I put her through that kind of pain just to enjoy it? Doing that would make me as bad as Penny and Rick. It's a cruise, Donnie. We have a client, a major website for single people. They've arranged a cruise for many of their members on a large cruise ship. They've already paid for their members, and there are still cabins available on the ship. They have already made their profit, so it doesn't matter if there is another single guy on the cruise. 10 days of fun, sun, and laughter will help heal a broken heart. Who knows, maybe you'll even meet someone. I'll think about it, Tanya, I said. But I really don't think I should try to date anyone until my divorce is finalized. You know what I mean, she smiled. You're a good guy all the way. Whatever Penny does, I hope she realizes what a fool she is. Let me know about the cruise, okay? I was doing everything I could to patch things up with Penny. My lawyer was working on the divorce, and I was dealing with my life. I asked my boss to transfer me to another neighborhood and told him about why I needed to get out of the area. It took a few days, but he did everything he could to help me. Our Phoenix plant had been interviewing engineers for over a month. The new place seemed just what I needed to start a new life. The warm weather and the ability to drive my car year-round also appealed to me. I would have to leave everything and everyone I knew behind, but that was what a fresh start was all about. I told Judy about my idea to leave the neighborhood, and she was very upset. When I explained my reasons to her, she agreed with me and said she felt the same way. She was still processing Ed's death. Her feelings were much the same as mine as she tried to process her daughter's betrayal. She was thinking of moving east to live with her older sister and mother, who shared a house in New York City. After hearing my story about her move, she started thinking about it again. I made her promise not to tell Penny about my plans. Honey, I don't have to tell her, she said. That girl is obsessed with you. She spends most of her time watching you. She's so afraid you're going to try to sleep with some other woman that she just goes crazy. She was furious when you stood on the porch that day talking to Tanya. She came home and cried for hours, calling Tanya a slut of all stripes. I think her biggest fear is that you'll fall in love with Tanya and tell her what happened. Then you and Tanya will sleep together and it will become a story. Saying that, she laughed. It's not really that far-fetched, I said. It really is, she said. Donnie, you really love my silly daughter. I saw the wheels turning in your head when you were talking to her the other day. You were trying so hard to think of ways to get her back, but I was glad it didn't work out for you. She's my baby and I love her. But I love you too, Donnie, and we both know what she's like. At least when this is all over, you'll have a friend in Arizona you can visit when it gets too cold in New York, I said. And you'll have someone in the Rotten Apple if you want to learn about other Southwestern cultures, she laughed. Donnie, promise me we'll keep in touch. I don't have a choice, I said. I've only had two people I've loved, and one of them doesn't really love me. That means you're all I have left. I was glad she told me about Penny, who followed me everywhere. I began to follow her whenever I went anywhere. One night I went to the movies, and as I was getting out of my car in the parking lot, I looked back. I noticed her watching me and decided to have a little fun with her. I looked at my watch like I was waiting for someone. I then pulled out my phone and used the Fandango app to buy a ticket. I called Judy and asked her to call Penny and let her know that my date was waiting for me at the movie theater. Penny got out of the car and angrily headed toward me. I quickly ran into the movie theater and told the man at the ticket booth that I had ordered tickets online. He looked into his computer, handed them to me, and I went to the right side of the building just as a furious Penny appeared in the doorway. She tried to walk in the direction she saw me, but was stopped by security. When she was escorted to the ticket booth, she realized that there was no way she could have known what movie I was attending, and there were at least 15 movies in the theater. 2 hours later, I walked out of the theater. Bye, I called out, waving my hand like I was talking to someone. I had a great time. We'll have to do it again. That's enough, Donnie, Penny said. Just cut the crap. You went to the movies alone. I've been following you since you left the building. Get used to it, Penny, I said. I won't always be alone. Sooner or later, I'll meet someone I want to date, and maybe more. Maybe I'll even meet the person I'll spend the rest of my life with. You've already met her, silly. She looks just like me, Penny said. You just need to pull your head out of your ass and start trying to get over my one little mistake. I laughed out loud and walked away. And then I realized that everything Judy had told me was true. I trusted Judy. I was sure she wouldn't tell Penny about my plans, but I still needed a way to get out of town without letting Penny know where I was going. The answer came from the most unlikely source. The next day, just getting home, I heard a quiet knock on the back door. I walked to the door and opened it. If I had to make a list of everyone I thought might be in the house, there was no way I would give him a place in it. Rick was standing at my back door, just like he used to when we were friends. The only difference was his body language. He knew he didn't belong here anymore. I guess he wasn't sure I wouldn't beat the shit out of him again. I didn't want to come, he said nervously. She made me. His gaze quickly darted over my shoulder. I saw Tanya watching us from the back porch. She smiled and waved. Come on in, buddy, I said loud enough for my voice to reach their house. I did everything you asked, he replied nervously. And I'm grateful you didn't say anything to Tanya. But if Tanya hadn't made me come here, I still would have had to call you. We have a problem. We don't have a damn thing in common, I grinned. We don't have anything in common. That's very true, he said. But neither of us wants Tanya to get hurt, right? I nodded. And we both have issues with your psycho ex, he said. She's threatening to tell Tanya herself if I don't try to help her get you back. She says it's unfair that one of us should keep the marriage together if we've both been cheating. She came to me yesterday. She's blackmailing me into giving her information about you and wants me to pressure you to get her back. I just looked at him. If he was hoping I would show sympathy, he was in for a disappointment. Suddenly I realized I could use him to solve my problem. Rick, do it, I said. He looked at me strangely. Does she know about the cruise Tanya organized for me? I asked. I don't think so, he replied. That's your information, I said. Give her all the information about the cruise. That should keep her happy for a while. It will be especially good if you tell her you tried to get me to forgive her. Let her think that if we're on the ship together and there's nowhere to go, there's a chance we'll talk. All right, he said. I'll do anything to save my marriage. I just stared at him. You can go, I said. The next day I got a call from Tanya. Donnie, Penny somehow found out about the cruise. Should I book her on the wrong cruise or something? Or do you want me to book her in the same room as yours or next to it? She asked. I can book you two together, although this is a singles cruise. Tanya, don't you get a commission on the cruises you book? I asked. Well, she said, but I don't need to try to get rich at the expense of my friends. Tanya, make that bitch pay in full, I said. You'll be doing me a huge favor and you'll help me more than you can imagine. Are you two back together? She asked. No way, I said. But why? She asked. What are you two mad about? She cheated on me, Tanya, I said sadly. I walked in and caught them. There was no chance of a mistake or misunderstanding. I saw them with my own eyes. There's no chance of us being together anymore. I just need to get away from her. Over the next few days, I began to prepare for the move. I looked at houses online. I contacted moving companies and called the new Phoenix office. Everything was ready for the move. I was still on the phone with Judy. One of us called the other at least twice a day. The saddest day before I left was the day Judy was leaving for New York. I stopped by her house to say goodbye, and naturally, Penny was there. She had been so busy getting ready for the cruise that she hadn't followed up with me the last few days. She smiled at me as she opened the door. "I miss you so much, honey," she said. I ignored her and headed over to Judy. Judy hugged me as tight and long as she had never hugged me before in her life. "I wish you'd hug your wife like that, not my mom," Penny said. "In a way, it's good that Mom is going to go live with Grandma and Aunt Nina. I think you're confused about who you care about." Judy and I laughed and stepped away from each other. Penny was driving Judy to the airport. I said goodbye and promised to call Judy every day. "I wish you would call me so we could talk," Penny said. "You do realize you're wasting your time, right? This divorce is going to drag on for decades. By the time we get to court, you'll have forgotten why you wanted to divorce me. I also know that you withdrew a large amount of money from our account. I didn't say anything about it because I did it too. Isn't that a strange coincidence?" Again, I just stepped away from her. She was so happy that she seemed about to explode at the thought of the two of us going on a cruise. She acted like we were going on a second honeymoon, not the two of us going on a cruise on the same ship, but not together. In fact, the possibility of me sleeping with other women while she was there didn't even cross her mind. 3 days later, I was ready to go on the trip. Tanya had prepared everything I needed to make sure I had everything I needed on the cruise. Just before the ship left, I called Penny. "Penny, I won't be home for about 10 days, I told her. "If you need to let me know anything regarding our divorce, you'll have to see my lawyer." "Thank you for telling me that," she replied cheerfully. "I hope you enjoy wherever you go. Maybe when the trip is over, you won't want to get divorced again. Maybe something will happen during your absence that will remind you how much I love you and that we need each other." "Not much chance of that," I said, laughing. She laughed too. "Is it really that hard for you to admit that you still love me, Donnie?" she asked. "No, it's not hard," I said. "I still love you. I just want you to love me enough to make me enough for you." "That's the way it is, you fool," she said sadly. "Have you ever heard the expression, 'one bite, too shy'? In our case, it means that I've seen what my life is like without you and I'm not going to do it again. Yes, Donnie, I'm human. I've made mistakes. But love had nothing to do with it. Something drew me to Rick and even I don't know what it was. Maybe we'll find out when we go to therapy. But you're the only man I've ever loved." "Since you're so fond of old sayings," I said, "have you ever heard that you can't fight nature?" She looked at me strangely and only sighed when I hung up. 6 hours later, the ship was at sea. It was almost out of cellular range when my phone rang. I looked at the screen of my iPhone and smiled. Looking out the window, I watched the scenery float by. And yes, I know that windows on a ship are called portholes. Penny may have had a porthole she was looking through, but I had a window. "Where the hell are you?" she shouted. "I've searched the whole damn ship and you're not on it." "Who says you are?" I laughed. "How the hell are we going to get back together if we don't spend time together?" she shouted. "You don't let me come home. You don't touch me or let me touch you. You barely talk to me. I'm going crazy. I love you, Donnie." "Okay, Penny," I said. "Once the cruise is over, I need to cool off. You can come home. But we won't sleep together." "It's not—" "I swear I'll do whatever it takes to get a place in your bed and in your heart again," she said as the phone buzzed. "I love you, Donnie." Then the phone went silent. I was still laughing as I crossed the border into yet another state. I took the time to call my only friend. "Hi, Judy," I said when she picked up the phone. "Donnie," she squeaked happily. "God, it's been so long since you called me." "Almost 4 hours," I said, laughing. "I'm starting to think I made a mistake," she said. "Do you have any idea what it's like to live with two stuck-up old women?" I started laughing. Judy always lifted my spirits. "Stop lying, Judy. I can't believe anyone could not want to be around you," I said. "Donnie, do you know what time it is?" she asked. "They say time heals all wounds," I said. "They're wrong," she said seriously. "I guess I forgot that my sister and I never got along. She and Mom have been together so long that their personalities have become similar. And now, I can't find common ground with either of them." I laughed again. Do you check your rearview mirrors to make sure you're not being followed? She asked. It's hard to keep up with a truck when you're on a ship, I replied. Now it was her turn to laugh. I'm not going to ask how you sneaked her onto the ship without you, she said. Remember the Calgon commercial? I said. I had my own ancient Chinese secret. I loved that commercial, she said. I guess I should go make mommy's tapioca. Drive safe, honey. I arrived in Phoenix late afternoon the next day. The first thing I did was get my Mustang off the trailer and put it in the garage. I was so excited that it would no longer have to endure the cold winter that I didn't pay attention to the heat and possible sun damage to the paint. I spent the next few days setting up and organizing everything in my new home. I scheduled appointments with the cable guy and other professionals to come in and do their thing. But when all was said and done, the house was beautiful, but it didn't feel like a house, just a place. The day before I was supposed to leave for my new job, it happened. My cell phone rang. I picked it up without looking at the screen. Where are you? She hissed. Why is all your stuff gone? You said I could come home. Since you called from home, you should be home, I said. That's what you wanted, isn't it? You know damn well that's not what I wanted, she hissed. I don't want an empty house. It's almost as bad as this ridiculous divorce you're insisting on. Don't worry about the divorce, I said. Your lawyer and my lawyer convinced me that without any proof, I'm screwed. I was practically at your mercy, so the divorce over your affair with Rick is over. Good, she squeaked. Now where are you, sweetheart? I'm coming to see you. I applied again, I said, and this time I'm not going to be so damn nice. She started laughing. Does it matter why you applied? She asked. Call your lawyer Penny, I said. He already has a copy of the case. Not only will I get a divorce, I'll probably be able to leave you next to nothing. Also, Penny, call me back soon if you want to make arrangements. I'm changing my cell phone number tomorrow. It was only an hour before Penny called me back. Okay, Donnie, you win. I signed the papers. How the hell did you get the video? I hired a private investigator to take my place on the cruise. I knew that when I wasn't around, you'd have no reason not to get your wishes. All I did was set you free. You can't go against nature. For that matter, I never watched the video. I didn't want to watch it. Thanks for proving me right about you. Donnie, I can change, she said. I don't think you can, I said. And to tell you the truth, I don't think you should. You're free now. Do whatever you want to do. I'm free too. I can find someone who will love me the way I need to be loved. Donnie, you just don't understand, she cried. It's me. Don't you get it yet? My father loved my mother more than anything in the world. Yes, he cheated on her. But it didn't mean a damn thing. It was just sex. He and my mom loved each other. That's why she could never let him go. And you and I are the same. You're gonna miss me. And when you do, I'll be here waiting for you. But I'll make sure you regret putting me through all this. 3 weeks later, I called Judy every day. There was a note of sadness in her voice that I recognized immediately. Okay, Judy, what's wrong? I asked. I'm fine, she replied. I'm just a little out of sorts. All right. Judy's trying to take all this shit out on someone who doesn't know you, I said. Tell me what's wrong. Donnie, moving here was a mistake, she said. I spent most of the money I got from selling the house to pay the taxes on this place and make some improvements. Now I'm stuck here. I have money left over from Ed's pension, but it's just a monthly check to cover my expenses. I don't have enough money to move anywhere else, let alone buy another house. So I've had thoughts about how nice it would be to move in with relatives. I guess I just didn't want to be alone. I've lived with someone else for over 20 years and… Good thing you still have family to move in with, I said. Oh no, she said. There's no chance of that. You have no idea what Penny's been doing since you divorced her. No, I don't, I said, but I wasn't talking about her. Why don't you come here and live with me? I've got plenty of room and I'd love to have you with me. Donnie, are you crazy? She asked. I can't live with you. You're my daughter's husband. Not anymore, I said. Why don't you come visit, and if you don't like it, you can always go back to New York. Okay, she said. How about a week-long visit? I still need to make sure you're okay. I've been visiting Penny in your old house. Well, you don't recognize it. Judy came and stayed with me for a whole week. She had so much fun that when it was time to leave, she didn't want to. We did everything together and we had fun. She made me go and see all the sights in the area that I hadn't made time for before. We also went shopping and she talked me into buying a lot of things for the house. In just a week, my house began to feel like home to me. I dreaded the thought of her leaving. She didn't say a word to me, so I decided I would drive her to the airport the next day. In the morning, she made me breakfast and asked me why I was so depressed. "Our week is over," I said. "I'm going to miss you a lot. Will you be able to come visit me again soon?" "No," she said. "And really, Donnie, I don't think you want me to." "Judy, you're my best friend. Of course I want to," I said. "Don't you want to come back and visit me?" "No," she said, smiling. "Because if I came back to visit you, it would mean I left, and I don't want to do that." I smiled and grabbed her. We kissed hard again, and I think we both knew something was going on, but neither of us were ready to admit it. The next morning I woke up early and she made breakfast for me again. "I can't send you to work on an empty stomach," she said. "Besides, I'm taking you to work today. I need the car to go shopping. We need groceries." "Are you sure you don't want to just drive the truck?" I asked. She stuck out her plump lower lip and held out her hand. For some reason, no red flags went off in my brain. Although I'd never let Penny drive my Mustang, the thought of Judy getting behind the wheel didn't seem horrible. I gently placed the keys in her hand and was rewarded with a smile that made my day better. After I ate breakfast, we got in the car and drove to my office. I expected her to leave, but she got out of the car and walked with me. She looked around my office and even met the receptionist. She smiled and led me to my inner office. "So why haven't you slept with this one yet?" she asked. "She's not my type," I replied. "She just laughed and said she would pick me up after work." I arrived home in the evening and we grilled steaks on the porch and admired the sunset. I noticed that she didn't just go shopping that day. She had decorated some of the rooms. A picture here, a trinket there, and it all began to look more like home. Things progressed very slowly over the next few weeks, but they did progress. I think what I had always felt crept up on me somehow on its own. It got to the point where in the evenings I just lived with Judy. Sometimes we'd take long drives on deserted roads and photograph landscapes and scenery. Other evenings we'd head into town to see a movie or try a new restaurant. But most of all, we both enjoyed quiet evenings at home. And honestly, I think I was the one who kept suggesting we go out. I think I was afraid that things might go wrong if we were alone too often. I think we had been living together for about 5 months when it happened. It was Judy's birthday, and I wanted to take her out on the town. I bought her a present, a diamond necklace, and I made reservations at one of the swankiest restaurants in town. We had a great dinner, and a traveling violinist serenaded us, ending with a rousing jazz version of Happy Birthday. I slid the box over to the table, and her eyes lit up. When she saw the necklace, her mouth dropped open and she asked me to put it on her. Same. I noticed she was smiling and then I noticed she was pointing behind my back. I turned around and finally noticed the waiter behind me. "I was just saying, sir, that your wife is the most beautiful woman here," he said. "You're right about that," I said. "Donnie, you should be saying thank you, silly," Judy giggled. Or at least correct him. He thought we were married. "I can't help but say thank you," I said. "Because that would mean I had something to do with you being so beautiful." And I couldn't correct him, because I don't have a problem with anyone thinking that we... "Are you ready for dessert?" "Yes," she said. "Can we take it with us? And can we eat it at home?" I don't think anyone can imagine how pleased I was to hear her say those words. All the time she had lived here, she had called it my house, which turned into home. Hearing her call it home gave me a warm feeling. When we got home, I thought it was the perfect ending to a wonderful evening. It seems strange to me. Maybe I'm getting old by the time I'm 30, but I was happy. I didn't need anything else. When we got home, we made love, and after showering, we collapsed on the bed. "I love you, Judy," I said. "5 months," she replied. "I can't believe we can do this for 5 months." "We wouldn't be able to," I said. "None of us are the type to just jump into bed with someone." "Maybe not," she laughed. "But we're both the kind of people who love very deeply and very sincerely." The next night when I got home, I had dinner and something else waiting for me. "I wanted to make sure last night wasn't an accident," she laughed. "We made it a rule. We never mentioned Ed or Penny. The past was behind us, and all we wanted to think about was the future. We had so many good times that there was no time for the past. We did a lot of things for the first time together. But the one thing we never talked about was marriage. I don't know why. Everyone we knew thought we were. But we never brought it up. But then again, we were too busy with the present and planning for the future to think about the past. That was until it came for us. I think we made one mistake. When Judy moved in with me, we had to move the rest of her things to Phoenix from New York. Penny went looking for her mom and her grandmother and aunt, neither of whom knew anything about our situation, happily gave her the address. After that, the comedy of unfortunate coincidences began. One Saturday, I went out to buy a few things so Judy and I could barbecue and bask in the sun in the big hammock on our deck. While I was gone, Penny showed up on the porch. Judy had no choice but to invite her into the house, hoping I would be gone long enough to get rid of her. Penny realized almost immediately that her mother didn't live alone, and that her neighbor was probably a man. Judy confirmed this and told Penny that she would meet her for breakfast the next morning. Penny drove off, but saw my car and recognized it. She didn't know the road and got lost for a while. I got home and Judy decided not to give me the bad news until we relaxed a bit. We were grilling steaks over low heat and were about to relax when we noticed someone had climbed to the top of our 6-foot fence and was watching us. Her eyes got as big as saucers and she started screaming like a banshee. We let her into the house. "I can't believe you two," she screamed. "Especially you, Mom. What will Daddy think?" "Penny, we're not married anymore," I said. "So what are you doing here?" "I came to try to find Mom," she said. "I was hoping she knew where you were. I need a little help." "What kind of help?" I asked. "I've lost almost all the money you left me, and I'm about to lose my house. I was hoping you'd give me another chance." "I realized how stupid I was," she said sadly. "I'm sorry, Penny, but there's no chance," I said. "You can't fight nature." "No, you can," she said. "If you want it bad enough, you can do anything. I swear I've changed." "I was talking about Judy's nature and mine," I smiled. "It's in our nature to fall in love with someone and stay that way forever. We can't fight it, but since you're our daughter, I guess we'll have to help you with a home. You'll go home and I'll put some money in your account, but you'll have to get yourself a job." "Why can't I stay here with you?" she asked. "Penny, just being around you reminds me of what you did to me and makes me angry all over again. It was the main reason I left town in the first place. Do you want the money or not?" "Of course," she said. Then she looked directly at Judy. "You're the one who doesn't want me here, aren't you, Mother? You know that if I had a fair chance to fight for them, you'd lose. And Donnie just agrees with you as much as he agrees with me. The poor deluded man thinks he loves you, but in reality he still loves me. He just stays with you because you're just like me and he knows you won't cheat on him." Judy and I laughed. We had already discussed Penny in our past enough that her ramblings didn't matter to us. I preferred Judy's kindness and accommodating nature to Penny's kindness and accommodating nature any day. And she liked the fact that the only woman I paid attention to was her. Penny left the next morning. She was still angry that we wouldn't let her stay with us, but it would have been very inconvenient, and I was pleased with the way things had turned out, and so was Judy. I think to some extent what happened to Penny was our fault. But really, we just wanted to be alone. We found out later that Penny had slept with several men in the neighborhood where we lived, including some of our friends. There was a lot of gossip about it. Early one morning, Tanya saw a couple of men leaving the house and confronted them. That's how Tanya found out everything. When she told them that they should be ashamed of embarrassing their wives with the neighbor's whore, they advised her to stop being so nosy and maybe she should keep an eye on her own husband instead of everyone else. They told her that was the reason I divorced Penny and left. Tanya met with Rick, who broke down and admitted his guilt. 2 days later, when Penny opened the door of the house and dropped her suitcases on the floor, she was overcome with a strange feeling. It was the last feeling she had ever experienced. She wondered if she should call one of the guys to make herself feel better. It wasn't until she reached for the phone that she noticed Tanya sitting in the dark. "I always thought we were friends," Tanya said with tears in her eyes. "We are friends," said a shocked Penny. "You had everything, Penny. You had a beautiful home, a good life, and a husband who idolized you. So why wasn't that enough?" Tanya asked. "I never thought he would find out," replied Penny. "I love him so much, but I couldn't control myself. I guess it's just something in me, like my father's. I guess you can't fight nature. When you're overcome by a desire like that, you can't suppress it." "Let me try to destroy it," Tanya said, and fired a bullet straight at Penny. Tanya called 911 and waited for the police. It was determined to be a crime of passion, and Tanya was sentenced to 8 to 15 years. Rick vowed that he would wait for her and visit her every week. Judy and I got married. When Penny was gone, we really became all each other had. There were articles written about Judy and me. Even though it happens much more often now, it's still big news when a woman in her 40s carries a child to full term. We had twins, and we didn't name them Penny and Ed. We stuck to the rule of leaving the past behind. Judy and I often visit Penny's grave and talk to her. When someone dies, it's sad and awful, and neither of us wished that fate for her. Neither of us had anything to do with her death, but we both feel some guilt for it. Both Ed and later Penny were victims of their own natures. It is sad and yet poetic that Penny refused to learn from her father's example and thus condemned herself to the same death. I guess you can't fight nature after all. This part of the story usually says that they lived happily ever after, and believe it or not, they did. The end. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.